So, you want to own an NFL team? Welcome to the most exclusive and arrogant club in America, where exactly 32 billionaires are allowed to sit at the table and carve up the most massive money-printing machine in sports history. Just think about it. Owning a cultural icon, having tens of thousands of screaming fans chanting your team's name every weekend, and wielding the ultimate power to command the world's top athletic superstars. It sounds incredibly majestic. But hey, before you call your bank to authorize a multi-billion-dollar wire transfer, let's sit down and talk about the math for a second. In 2023, the financial world was left stunned when private equity titan Josh Harris and his ownership group shelled out an unfathomable $6.05 billion to acquire the Washington Commanders. Just a year prior, Walmart retail empire heir Rob Walton also had to write a massive check worth $4.65 billion to take home the Denver Broncos. You are probably thinking that the sharpest minds from Wall Street to the biggest retail system on the planet must certainly see a hidden goldmine of profits here, right? The truth is the exact opposite. If we look at it from a purely economic perspective based on core operating cash flow, buying an NFL team at current valuations is a laughably foolish move. Just look at the actual financial statements. The annual revenue of a mid-tier NFL franchise only hovers around $500 million to $600 million. After deducting astronomical operating costs, player salaries, executive compensation, and taxes, the actual operating net profit margin typically stagnates between 10 and 15%. This means that every year, a machine that devours billions of dollars only generates about $50 million to $100 million in free cash flow. Let's do some simple Wall Street mental math. You drop $6 billion to collect less than $100 million a year. That means your operating return on investment, ROI, is under 2%. In fact, it would take you up to 60 years to recoup your initial principal if you only scrape together pennies from selling tickets, hot dogs, and jerseys. Truth be told, if Josh Harris had dumped that $6 billion straight into S&P 500 index funds or simply bought 10-year U.S. Treasury bonds, he could have slept soundly and effortlessly raked in at least $300 million in cash every single year. No headache dealing with the ruthless media, no stress over massive $250 million contract extensions like those of Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson, and absolutely no constant fear of investigatory fines from the U.S. Congress or the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. So why on earth are these old capitalist wolves willing to trample each other to snatch up a franchise that is being inflated to the moon? Are they crazy? Or did they suddenly decide to do charity work for national sports? Absolutely not. The true nature of the NFL is never about the few dozen million dollars trickling into their pockets each year. The game here is designed around the concept of a vanity asset, the ultimate piece of jewelry for the ultra-rich. When you throw money at a team, you aren't buying a retail company or a manufacturing plant. You are buying a permanent first-class ticket into the most powerful room in America, where you can pick up the phone and directly negotiate with state governors, senators, and the global elite. More importantly, the NFL machine is a perfect financial illusion that blindsides the public. It operates on a principle completely antithetical to the ruthless free market capitalism that America proudly preaches. On the surface, it's bloody competition on the turf. But inside the closed boardrooms, the shot callers have engineered an impenetrable defense system, a sort of socialism reserved strictly for the elite, where business risk has been whittled down to a perfect zero. Imagine this. In America, if you open a restaurant chain, serve terrible food, hire rude staff, and nobody bothers to step through your doors, what happens? The mechanism of the free market will crush you. You will default on your loans, banks will foreclose on your assets, and you will vanish from the business world within 6 months. That is the cold-blooded rule of capitalism. And yet, in the NFL, that fundamental principle is completely thrown out the window. If your team performs abysmally for an entire decade, the stands are practically empty, fans are burning jerseys demanding the head coach be fired, and you become a laughingstock on social media, guess what happens to your bank account? Hard to believe, but you will still rake in hundreds of millions of dollars in profit. Welcome to the model of billionaire socialism, the secret weapon that forged the league's monopolistic power. The heart of this money-printing machine lies in a core financial mechanism: national revenue sharing. It all stems from a rare legal privilege that former league commissioner Pete Rozelle begged and secured from the U.S. Congress via the Sports Broadcasting Act of 1961. This act granted the NFL an antitrust exemption, allowing them to pool all the team's television broadcasting rights and sell them as a single entity. And they sold it for an unfathomable price. In 2021, the NFL locked down an 11-year broadcasting mega deal worth up to $110 billion, with the most formidable media giants in the world, including CBS, NBC, Fox, ESPN, and even tech juggernaut Amazon. What was the consequence of this precedent-setting transaction? In 2023, the league quietly wired each team a check worth an average of about $374.4 million. This means that even before the stadium doors opened, before the first ticket was sold or a single jersey hung on the racks, every owner had nearly $400 million in cold hard cash pocketed. And here is the real slap in the face to the free market economy. This colossal check is split absolutely evenly, down to the exact penny, among all 32 teams. No exceptions whatsoever. No discrimination. Whether you are the shining defending champions like the Kansas City Chiefs bringing in tens of millions of viewers, or an absolute disastrous mess losing left and right like the Carolina Panthers, you receive the exact same payout. Your sheer managerial incompetence is directly subsidized by the excellence of other franchises. In the world of private equity or Wall Street, this is what they call the most perfect downside protection mechanism ever invented by mankind. You can never truly lose money, because this shared cash flow essentially covers the absolute largest and most headache-inducing expense of any sports franchise: player salaries. But hey, even though the league has secured the revenue side, the billionaires would never just let expenses freely inflate at the mercy of superstar greed. They shook hands to engineer a financial firewall that is equally ruthless and sophisticated, completely suffocating any hope of bleeding out profits from the labor side. Do you know what seasoned business owners fear the most? It's not their competitors, but their own egos and greed. Truth be told, if you gave 32 billionaires with egos the size of a stadium free rein to bid wildly for a genius quarterback, they would drive each other straight off the cliff into bankruptcy. That is precisely the tragedy that occurred in early baseball leagues, where rich teams bought up all the talent and choked out the rest. To prevent that bloody scenario, NFL owners sat down and invented one of the most ruthless and brilliant financial control mechanisms in history: the salary cap. On media networks, league PR experts constantly parrot the chorus that the salary cap was created to maintain competitive balance, ensuring every team has a shot at winning the Super Bowl. Sounds incredibly noble and fair, but behind the scenes, this is purely a firewall against human resource cost inflation. By establishing an impenetrable hard cap, set at exactly $255.4 million for the 2024 season, the league strictly forbids any team from spending a dime over this number on player payroll, no matter how filthy rich they are. Let's connect this number to the big picture from Chapter 2. Remember that evenly shared television rights check worth $374.4 million? The math at this point becomes so predictably absurd, it's almost bitter for the players. The TV money each team receives is more than enough to cover 100% of the maximum payroll, leaving the owner with over $100 million in leftover cash to handle other operating expenses. Every single dime of revenue from ticket sales, beer, parking, or local sponsorships practically flows straight into the net profit margin. The owner's profitability has been mathematically locked in. But the brutality of the American capitalist game doesn't stop there. This firewall is reinforced by another heavy weapon: the nature of NFL contracts. Unlike the NBA or MLB, where contracts are 100% fully guaranteed, football is a violent game with an average career lifespan of merely 3.3 years. And yet, NFL contracts are largely non-guaranteed contracts. The press might run massive headlines about a superstar signing a monster $150 million deal, but the reality is that the guaranteed money is usually only half of that. If he tears his ACL the very next season, or his performance drops off, the owner has the absolute right to cut him and toss him to the curb without paying out the remainder of the contract. Ultimately, under the guise of the Collective Bargaining Agreement, CBA, the players are capped at receiving a maximum of roughly 48% of the league's total revenue. The battered heroes smashing their heads against each other on the turf are, in reality, just rapidly depreciating assets. Despite past efforts of strikes or lawsuits, the salary cap firewall stands tall, absolutely protecting the boundless wealth of the ownership class. Do you really think the ultra-rich dump billions of dollars into a franchise just so they can invite their VIP friends on weekends to watch guys in armor smash into each other on the turf? Come on, wipe that naive thought out of your head immediately. At the level of the Wall Street overlords, that football is nothing but a tool. In reality, an NFL franchise in the hands of a sophisticated tycoon acts merely as a massive anchor tenant to legitimize a much grander and terrifyingly profitable scheme, a mixed-use real estate empire. Let's look straight at the classic case of billionaire Stan Kroenke, a real estate mogul and husband of Walmart heiress Ann Walton. In 2016, Kroenke pulled a shocking move by dragging the St. Louis Rams out of their hometown and relocating them to Los Angeles. The media at the time dissected all sorts of reasons, from a more lucrative television market to the allure of the entertainment capital. But hey, the true motive behind this ruthless relocation lay in a 300-acre plot of land in Inglewood, California. Kroenke didn't just want to build a stadium. He wanted to build an entire mini-city. The centerpiece of this mega project is SoFi Stadium, an architectural marvel that cost a staggering $5.5 billion, making it the most expensive sports stadium on the planet. And yet, if you only look at the field, you've fallen into the trap. To put it bluntly, that colossal stadium is essentially the most glamorous loss leader in America. A football team only plays exactly 8 to 9 regular season home games a year. That means for the remaining 350-ish days, that $5.5 billion concrete block would sit completely dormant if it solely relied on football. The real cash flow math reveals itself when you look at the surrounding area. Leveraging the massive gravitational pull of the Rams, Kroenke inflated the value of that 300-acre plot to the moon and transformed it into the Hollywood Park project. Around that stadium, the billionaire sprouted 2,500 luxury apartments, nearly 900,000 square feet of high-end retail space, a 300-room hotel, and a series of Class A office towers. The peak of irony is that Kroenke even lured NFL Media, the league's own media arm, to sign a long-term lease right on his property. That is the absolute magic of the elite. They use the brand of a sports team to fast-track zoning permits, sometimes even strong-arming local governments into concessions or subsidizing infrastructure using taxpayers' money. Once the stadium takes shape, the value of adjacent real estate triples or quadruples. While football ticket revenue is strictly capped by stadium capacity, the commercial retail leases, monthly apartment rents, and entertainment events running 365 days a year pump an endless, steady, and inexhaustible stream of cash straight into the owner's pockets. Ultimately, the team is just a gilded excuse, while collecting rent from the land is the enduring nature of capitalism. Let's just pretend you recently sold a Silicon Valley unicorn and pocketed $10 billion. You proudly stroll into the NFL headquarters on Park Avenue in New York, slam a blank check on Commissioner Roger Goodell's desk, and demand to buy a franchise. Do you think they'll roll out the red carpet for you? It's highly likely that security will politely escort you out the door immediately. The truth is, having money doesn't necessarily buy you everything, and it certainly isn't enough to buy an American football team. To put it bluntly, the NFL does not operate like a free, open market. It is a closed cartel, a modern iteration of a capitalist secret society, where the 32 current owners hold absolute power of life and death. To get your foot in the door, you must pass a grueling voting process, requiring the explicit nod of at least 24 out of 32 members. But hey, that is merely a test of culture fit. The real barrier that makes even the most hardened Wall Street players sweat bullets is the league's extremely conservative financial rulebook. The most draconian rule of the game is called the 30% equity rule. The league dictates that the principal individual, lead owner, must put down at least 30% of the transaction value in liquid cash. Let's revisit the $6.05 billion acquisition of the Washington Commanders by Josh Harris. Applying this rule, Harris had to personally scramble and immediately fork over a cash sum of more than $1.8 billion. It might sound like a normal Tuesday for a billionaire, but bear this principle in mind. The ultra-rich never hold cash. Their wealth is tied up in stocks, real estate, and investment funds. To scrape together $1.8 billion in liquid cash, a billionaire would have to fire sale stocks, swallow massive capital gains taxes, or find a way to mortgage personal assets at exorbitant interest rates. Truth be told, the NFL's debt limit is also brutally restrictive. While Wall Street financiers are hopelessly addicted to leveraged buyouts, LBOs, where they borrow 90% to buy a company and then dump that massive debt onto the company itself, the NFL strictly prohibits this dark magic. The maximum debt ceiling to acquire a team is hard-locked at around $1.2 billion. Because of this terrifying liquidity barrier, Josh Harris had to hustle everywhere to assemble an Avengers-level syndicate of 20 heavyweight investors, dragging in basketball legend Magic Johnson and industrial billionaire Mitchell Rales to chip in and fragment the financial burden. But the story doesn't end there. For decades, the NFL hung a giant "Keep Out" sign for private equity funds. The current owners understand the ruthless nature of PE funds all too well. They constantly crave quarterly profits, love to slash costs, and are perfectly willing to gut the cultural fabric of a franchise to optimize their return on investment. And yet, as franchise valuations were blown up to the $8 billion to $10 billion range, the number of individuals on Earth with enough liquid cash to buy a team outright could be counted on one hand. Unable to resist the evolutionary laws of capital, in August 2024, the NFL finally, reluctantly, cracked the door open for prominent PE funds like Ares Management and Arctos Partners, but they did so with supreme arrogance. PE funds are strictly capped at buying a maximum 10% stake in a team, and they are granted absolutely no voting rights. Simply put, throw your money in here, but keep your mouths shut, sit quietly in the back seat, and let us drive. That is exactly how the league protects its crown. By erecting extreme financial fences, the NFL ensures that only individuals who are not just immensely wealthy, but also entirely submissive to the cartel's rules, are ever allowed to touch the golden trophy. Do you think that once you've made it onto the list of the 32 powerful owners, you hold a guaranteed get-out-of-jail-free card? The truth is, no financial defense system can save you if you set your own house on fire. Let's look at one of the most classic power suicides in American sports history. In 1999, a young entrepreneur named Dan Snyder shocked the elite by shelling out $800 million, an unprecedented record price at the time, to acquire the Washington Redskins franchise. The team has since been forced to rebrand as the Washington Commanders. Instead of managing this money-printing machine wisely, Snyder turned one of the oldest and most historically proud sports brands in America into his own dictatorial personal fiefdom. He squeezed fans to the absolute bone, from selling expired peanuts in the stands to sending lawyers to sue elderly fans who couldn't keep up with their season ticket payments during an economic recession. Under Snyder's operational hands, the team drowned in a breathless losing streak for 2 decades. But hey, in the NFL, terrible management and constant losing on the turf are not actually crimes. As we dissected in the previous sections, no matter how abysmal you are, that revenue-sharing check still arrives like clockwork every year. The real red line that Snyder arrogantly stomped on was messing with the life-or-death boundaries of the capitalist cartel. The true crisis erupted when a series of investigations exposed an incredibly toxic workplace environment, accompanied by harassment allegations targeting cheerleaders and female staff. This vile situation went so far that the U.S. Congress had to officially open a congressional hearing, dragging the highly dangerous, scrutinizing glare of federal lawmakers straight into the secretive business empire of the entire league. However, the fatal blow that led to Snyder's demise lay in a dollar bill. He was accused by investigations of maintaining a 2-sets-of-books system to skim fans' ticket deposits and hide away ticket revenue that was supposed to be pooled and shared with the other 31 owners. The press can publicly shame you, fans can boycott you, and the league can turn a blind eye. But stick your hand into the pockets of your billionaire partners and draw government attention, and there is only one verdict: excommunication. The pressure cascading from the upper echelons of the NFL hit like an avalanche. No one can single-handedly fight off the other 31 old wolves. Dan Snyder finally had to surrender, accepting the stripping of his ownership in the form of a forced sale of the team. Ultimately, the most insane and ironic part of this whole story lies in the so-called punishment. A man who spent 24 years destroying a billion-dollar brand and dragging the league's name through the mud was finally forced to hand over the team to Josh Harris's investment group at a valuation of $6.05 billion. That's right, a complete and utter failure in both morality and management, chased out of the empire in disgrace, casually walks out the door with a colossal profit, turning his initial $800 million into over $6 billion. Truth be told, this is the most brutal proof of how terrifyingly powerful the protective umbrella of upper-class capitalism truly is. At this echelon, even the most disastrous collapse is padded with a solid gold parachute. Every perfect money-printing machine hides a ticking time bomb under the table. For the NFL elite, the risk that makes them sweat bullets in the middle of the night isn't a losing season or empty stands, but subpoenas attached to a terrifying medical term, CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. To put it bluntly, the true nature of American football is a legalized car crash repeated weekly on national television. Muscular heroes weighing hundreds of pounds slam into each other at terrifying speeds, creating concussions that directly devastate the brain. For decades, the league tried to cover up the truth, and yet, when the glaring medical aftermath began to be exposed to the sunlight, this empire had to face an astronomical legal nightmare. In 2013, the NFL had to swallow a bitter pill and settle a historic lawsuit with over 4,500 former players. The owners agreed to establish an uncapped compensation fund, which to date has an estimated payout exceeding the $1.2 billion mark. But hey, in reality, $1 billion split among 32 tycoon owners is still just spare change compared to a $100 billion TV deal. The real risk that is currently suffocating the owners lies in the insurance market. Imagine you are a heavyweight Wall Street insurance conglomerate. Would you dare sell a workers' compensation policy to a company where the employees are almost guaranteed to suffer broken bones, torn ligaments, and permanent brain damage after just 3 years on the job? Of course not. Or you would demand an exorbitant premium. Team insurance premiums are bloating out of control. Many major insurance carriers have flat-out refused to protect the NFL from future concussion-related lawsuits. The inevitable consequence is that billionaires are being forced to set aside massive risk reserve funds using their own cold, hard cash. However, the most terrifying ghost directly threatening the multi-billion-dollar valuations of these franchises in the long term doesn't reside in the courtroom, but at dinner tables across American suburbs. As bloody documentaries detailing the devastation of CTE are widely broadcast, middle-class mothers have grown terrified and started forbidding their children from touching a football. Youth registration numbers in traditional leagues like Pop Warner have witnessed extremely severe declines. If the cheap human asset supply pipeline from high schools and colleges gradually shrinks, and if Gen Z begins to turn its back on this brutally violent sport in favor of soccer or esports, the solid foundation of an entire empire will shake violently. Ultimately, the upper class can engineer a flawlessly perfect financial system to squeeze out every last penny on the turf, but they absolutely cannot force people to keep buying tickets if the public starts viewing their product as a moral crime. It's time to lay our cards on the table. Stripping away the blinding glamour of the Super Bowl trophy, the lavish VIP suite parties, or the soft power that sways the political elite, let's put everything on the brutal mathematical scale of Wall Street. Ultimately, is dropping $6 billion to buy an NFL team a stroke of genius or the absolute peak of stupidity? Let's establish the two most realistic return on investment, ROI, scenarios that every tycoon must carefully calculate before putting pen to a check. Look at the worst-case scenario. Let's hypothesize that the TV bubble finally bursts after the current $110 billion broadcasting deal expires, fans grow utterly sick of referee scandals, and the wave of CTE fears causes the younger generation to completely turn their backs on football. Revenue flatlines, while inflation and operating costs bloat. Sounds like an absolute disaster, right? But hey, in the world of those holding monopolistic privileges, the word bankruptcy simply does not exist. Even in this doomsday scenario, your franchise will never evaporate to zero. The value of an NFL franchise is strictly pegged to absolute scarcity. America has thousands of billionaires, but there will perpetually only be exactly 32 teams. This exclusivity transforms it into a form of a store of value that cannot be diluted, much like a Picasso painting or real estate on Fifth Avenue. Your operating cash flow might stagger at 2%, but you are essentially parking your billions in the safest bunker in America, practically immune to stock market crashes. You just sit tight, collect a few dozen million in spare change each year, and wait for some newly minted, fame-hungry tech billionaire to come knocking to buy it at break-even or a slight loss. However, if you look at the best-case scenario, the profit picture would make any capital hunter drool. The true profit of this model never lies in annual dividends. It lies entirely in capital appreciation. NFL owners are quietly paving the way for massive new waterfalls of cash. They are kicking the doors wide open for streaming giants like Netflix, Apple, and Amazon to jump into future broadcasting bidding wars. They are swallowing the cash flow from the legalized sports betting wave worth tens of billions of dollars. And most importantly, they are internationalizing the sport with sold-out games in London, Frankfurt, and soon, Madrid. Let's reapply the compound growth math. In 2014, the Buffalo Bills were sold for $1.4 billion. Nearly a decade later, the absolute floor price for a bottom-tier team like Washington hit $6.05 billion. With the gravitational pull of private equity cash now officially greenlit to pump into the league, the continued inflation of franchise valuations is an absolute certainty. In this scenario, a player throwing $6 billion on the table today could perfectly well sell that machine for $15 billion to $20 billion in just 10 to 15 years. Truth be told, that is the most ruthless and flawless beauty of the apex capitalist machine. You enter the game buying a piece of luxury jewelry, leisurely soak in the adoration of millions, strong-arm local governments into building stadiums with tax money, and squeeze players with a draconian salary cap. And when you grow tired of the game, you casually walk out the door with a check that triples or quadruples your initial investment. So, you want to own a football team? Just have your cold, hard cash ready. Toss aside your business conscience and learn how to smile arrogantly. Because once you manage to step through the doors of this 32-person secret society, mathematics will automatically bend to serve you.